So today's Thursday, we're going to be using trigonometry to find a missing angle measure. Yesterday we learned how to find missing side lengths using sine, cosine, and tangent. So today's learning target is I can use SOHCAHTOA to find a missing angle measure. So just giving you a heads up, we need to be familiar with the inverse trig functions. Do not worry, you'll just be using your calculator to evaluate the inverse trig, which are only used to find angles. So sine, cosine, and tangent are used to find side lengths. Inverses are used to find angles. So for instance, the inverse of sine is arc sine. That's how you say it verbally. So the inverse of cosine is arc cosine. The inverse of tangent is arc tan. But on the calculator, it's expressed as, if you have a graphing calculator at home, it's above the sine, cosine, and tangent key. You would hit second sine, and it would give you like a sine to the -1, which means the angle whose sine is the number x. But to find a missing angle, it's still the exact same procedure as finding a side length, but instead of given an angle, you're given a reference angle, and you don't know what the value of that reference angle is. So to find a missing angle, we still label our sides as opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. We determine the trig function, so sine, cosine, tan, set up our equation, then we use inverse trig to solve for x. So you're always going to be given a variable for your angle that you want to find. So the first thing we do is we always label our hypotenuse, which is across from our right angle. So 20 is our height. The angle across from your reference is your opposite. And then last but not least, you have your adjacent. So what I like to do when I want to figure out am I doing sine, cosine, or tangent is I always go to the side of my paper and I write SOHCAHTOA. Because I know sine is opposite over hypotenuse, I know cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and I know tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I go through it one by one. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. I have no information about my opposite, so I can't use sine. Do I have information about my adjacent? Yes. Do I have information about my hypotenuse? Yes. It looks like I'm going to be using cosine for this question. So here's how we do the setup for these problems. My reference angle is A, and I want to find A. So I write this as cosine A equals my adjacent over my hypotenuse, so 13 over 20. Now, all we do, I now need to solve for A, but the thing is I can't divide by a cosine because cosine isn't a number. Cosine is a function. So to get rid of my cosine, I'm actually going to be doing a little nifty trick. And this you can't do in your head, you can't do this by hand, you need to do this on a calculator. You simply get rid of your cosine by taking the inverse of it. So I'm taking the inverse, I get cosine to the -1 of 13 over 20. We type this into our calculator, and this is the procedure. You literally take that one function, do 13 divided by 20 in the calculator, and I find out what my angle is. My angle is 49.5 degrees. This is the rule. This is how you approach every single problem. We're now going to endeavor into this next example where we want to find reference angle B. So remember, the first step we always do is we label all of our information. The side across from my right angle is my hypotenuse. The side across from my reference is my opposite. And then last but not least, I have my adjacent. I now want to figure out, am I using sine, cosine, or tangent? So I go to the side, I write SOHCAHTOA. And I do this for every single example. So after labeling my sides as hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent, I need to figure out, is it sine, cosine, or tangent? So I have information about my opposite and my hypotenuse, so it has to be sine. Here's my setup. Sine of my angle B equals my opposite, which is 40 over 42. So now that I have the 40 over 42, I need to do my inverse trig. I need to get rid of my sign. And to do this, I take the inverse of both sides. So by doing the inverse of sine, I'm really getting b equals inverse sine, or arc sine, of 40 over 42. I type that into my calculator, and I'm going to get 72.2 degrees. That is your final answer. So what I would recommend is take a pause, rewatch this part, rewatch the part from the top, or attempt the next question by yourself. If you're still 100% stuck, I would recommend you move on with me and we do example 3 together. So let's do example 3. So my first step is to identify my reference angle. In this question, my reference angle is C. So I'll mark it with blue. And now I need to label my hypotenuse, my opposite, and my right angle. I mean my opposite, my adjacent, and my hypotenuse. So my hypotenuse is always across from your right angle. My opposite is across from my reference angle. And my adjacent is last but not least. So now that I have those labeled, I need to figure out what my trig function is. So to figure out your trig function, we immediately write down SOHCAHTOA. We write down SOHCAHTOA, which is going to be in red. So I need to figure out what I have information about. So I'll do it in blue. I have information about my opposite, but I don't have information about my hypotenuse. So I'm going to circle and cross out. I have information about my adjacent, but I don't have information about my hypotenuse. So I can't use cosine either. So by default, I have to use tangent. So when using tangent, it's the exact same procedure as before. I'm going to set up my equation. So I have tangent of C equals my opposite of 10 over my adjacent of 29. I now take the inverse of both sides, and I get C equals tan, or arctan, of 14 over 29. I type that into my calculator, and I get 25.8 degrees. That is your final answer. So here's what you need to do to be successful. You need to rewatch this video. You need to write down one question you have after watching this video a second time. Post that question to the discussion board on Google Classroom. If you have any more questions, email me. Make sure you do your independent practice. It's due tomorrow at 11:59. You also have a quiz tomorrow that will be due Saturday by 11:59. There are videos on the Google Classroom that go through this, but you definitely need a calculator. To do these on the calculator, you need Desmos. So type it into your screen, phone, whatever. Again, if you're stuck, watch the video, email me. I do have office hours. All right?